What's up guys, my name is Ace, and you might be watching this gameplay already and thinking, how did you get into such an easy bot lobby here? Well, it turns out the players I'm playing against here weren't bad players at all throughout the match, until I activated Sleeper Agent, which is the brand new field upgrade with Black Ops 6, and I wanted to have a discussion about it now that we've had some proper playtime with it, because I'm personally not a big fan of it, and I don't think it has a great place in Call of Duty. With that being said, I do want to provide some feedback on this on some ways that I feel it could be improved. But first, let's go over exactly how this works. With this field upgrade, when you activate it, for the duration that it's active for, you're going to appear in-game as a teammate for the enemy players. So what this means is for enemy players, instead of you showing up with a red name tag and dot above your head, now you're going to have a blue dot and name tag above your head, so it looks like you're a teammate as far as I can tell just looking at you in the match. Now, to be clear, outside of that, with things like the minimap, for instance, you will still show up as an enemy, so if you fire an unsuppressed gun, you'll still show up as a red dot, or even if you aren't showing up on their minimap, that alone is also information the enemy could use, because they'll see a teammate on their screen, but no teammate on their minimap in that location. Now, with this field upgrade, it does have a very long charge time, and unfortunately in a beta, I don't have a really controlled environment to test this on, but in my experience, you're probably only going to earn the Sleeper Agent once or maybe twice in a game. That kind of depends on how well you're performing, as well as which game mode you're playing. But in Team Deathmatch, for instance, typically, in my experience at least, you're only going to be earning one of these throughout a match. Then when it comes to your active duration, this appears to be 30 seconds by default. However, for every kill that you get while this is active, it will extend that timer by 3 seconds. As a result, as long as you can keep up with the pace of killing enemies, you can keep this active for a very, very long time in the match. Now, one key thing to point out here is the enemy team will get an announcement when you activate this.
To Rogue Spy, we know you're here. We're coming for you.
So if you're paying really close attention to the announcer and catch that, then that definitely helps. And also you might notice the kill feed right there. Anytime you see like a blacked out kill feed, that means it's an enemy sleeper agent getting a kill on your teammates. So that's another indicator that there is a sleeper agent currently active. And then on top of this, let's go over some of the counterplay to this. And the first big counter here is the vigilance perk in tier 2. With this one, it's just a full counter to sleeper agent. And this means that instead of those players having a blue name tag above their head and blue dot, it will display normally as a red dot and red name tag, and therefore it just has no effect on vigilance users. On top of that, while I can't test this with absolute certainty, I'm quite confident the tracker perk will also work against the sleeper agent players, so you'll still be able to see their footsteps highlighted as if they were a normal enemy player. On top of this, since they show up normally on the minimap as an enemy, the UAV and Scout Pulse are also potential counters to this, because you'll be seeing them as a red dot on the minimap, possibly before you even run into them, although of course they could be using the Ghost perk at that point, which will counteract that. And then one final counter, I don't know if it's really a counter, but more just something to look out for, is if you pay attention to which faction you are on, you'll actually be able to tell just by looking at the character model of that player whether they're on your team or not. But that does take a fair amount of game experience to just intuitively know that that character model is not on the same faction as you are in that particular match. And also, I don't know if this is going to hold true down the road once we get a bunch of new skins to the game, and I believe we may end up seeing universal skins that will apply to both factions, but maybe I'm mistaken on that one. Even if we don't, I do fear down the road, we're just going to have so many different skins and character models in the game that it's going to be practically impossible to keep up with which one applies to which faction. And there we go, that outlines a bunch of the counterplay and how you could potentially detect sleeper agent users. And once you know a good handful of these things, I definitely think it cuts down on the frustration that can be caused by this. But in saying that, I'm still not a big fan of sleeper agent being in the game, at least in the state that it's currently in, because I do feel there are some fairly obvious issues with this. And the first thing to point out here is, compared to the other field upgrades, I just think this gives you too much of an advantage going into a fight. This is the type of thing where even if you don't fully fool an enemy player, it's going to cause hesitation more often than not, and all it takes to lose a gunfight in Call of Duty is half a second or less of hesitation. And looking at the other field upgrades we have in the game, none of them provide that much of an advantage or a buff going into a gunfight compared to something like Sleeper Agent. So just on the power side of things, I do think this is quite powerful once it's active. Additionally, it lasts for a very long time, even if you're not getting any kills to extend the duration further. 30 seconds is a pretty long duration in a Call of Duty game. And then when you add the additional time on top of that for every kill that you get, that extra 3 seconds per kill, if you can chain things together, you can keep this going for a really long time. In fact, I've only used Sleeper Agent a small handful of times, and I've already had a streak go for almost an entire minute with that Sleeper Agent active And 1 minute in Call of Duty terms is a really long time. That's a pretty good chunk of your match, having a very significant advantage over enemy players as you get into a gunfight. To top that off, another reason I don't really like this is I fear this may push some players away that don't take the time to really get familiar with the systems. Because at first glance, this just appears to be a major bug with the game. I just imagine a new player coming into the game for the first time, they don't read through every single field upgrade and how they work, they're just hopping into the game, and suddenly they're getting killed by their teammates. Do you think that player is going to take the time to go research the field upgrades? Or is it more likely they're just going to be like, this game's bugged and broken, my enemies keep showing up as teammates, and that's not fair, so I'm just not going to play this game anymore? I've actually already seen a couple comments from people saying that they think there is a bug when it comes to teammates because they're unfamiliar with this, and I could see how that would push some people away immediately. Next, even though I'm a controller player, I've got to admit, this is significantly more powerful against mouse and keyboard players, and the reason behind this is Sleeper Agent doesn't appear to disable aim assist against you when it's active. So controller enemies will still get aim assist on you, which means there's at least the potential for them to like feel out the fact that you are an enemy rather than a teammate, and mouse and keyboard players don't get that benefit at all. Now in saying this, I don't know what the solution is there, because if Sleeper Agent did disable aim assist, that would make it incredibly broken against controller players. Because just think of it this way, if we had a field upgrade that did nothing but disable aim assist for a period of time for your enemies, that alone, even without the trickery that we have with Sleeper Agent that shows you as a teammate, that alone would be an incredibly powerful field upgrade. And therefore adding that on top of Sleeper Agent against controller users, I think that would be way too much. So then I don't really know how you balance that appropriately to where it's fair for both input types when playing in the same lobbies together. Next up, something I can only really speculate at this point because we don't have access to this in the beta. I'm very curious to see what Sleeper Agent looks like in hardcore game modes. Since in hardcore, by default at least, you don't have those heads-up display elements that could potentially inform you of the fact that somebody is a sleeper agent. And on top of that with hardcore, you can't risk just shooting every teammate you come across because you will kill them. So how is that going to be balanced for hardcore game modes? I'm very curious to see that, but it seems like this is going to be totally broken for hardcore modes. And then one last thing that I just don't like about Sleeper Agent is it's just annoying and frustrating to die to because it completely throws out the traditional sense of how gunfights and gameplay flow works. At the most basic level, when you see an enemy, you shoot an enemy. When you see a teammate, you don't shoot the teammate. And this throws that out the window completely. And honestly, as I was using this, I just genuinely felt bad getting the kills that I was getting. It was kind of funny in the moment, but at the same time, I felt really bad because I also feel like I didn't really earn those kills. This is a field upgrade that you just get for existing in the match for a period of time. Obviously, you do charge it up faster by getting kills and score, for instance, but even just existing will give you one of these. And it can result in a good handful of just free kills that, in my opinion, aren't really earned. And that kind of goes along with what I said earlier with how powerful this is for gunfights relative to the other field upgrades. So that's my list of gripes so far with the Sleeper Agent field upgrade. Personally, while I can acknowledge that there is a fair amount of counterplay attached to this, and perhaps a lot of the things I'm noticing right now are just early things, and maybe down the road nobody even ever uses Sleeper Agent, and right now we're just seeing it because it's the brand new thing. But even with those things in mind, like I said, I think there are some fairly obvious issues with this field upgrade, and I'm personally just not a big fan of it. However, I don't really see it going anywhere. I don't think they're just gonna totally remove it from the game or anything. And therefore, why not provide some feedback for it instead on how I feel it could be improved and maybe some of the frustration could be reduced. And the first thought I had here is perhaps if a player activates Sleeper Agent, it still works exactly the same as it currently does. However, the twist is, for that active duration, all you get is a pistol and a combat knife, and even give that pistol an infinite reserve ammo that will last for the entire duration of that Sleeper Agent streak, so you don't have to worry about running out of ammo with the pistol, but make it so that's all you've got and you can't pick up any guns off the ground while it's active. If that were the case, I'd actually have a lot less of a problem with Sleeper Agent, because you would have to approach your situations a lot more carefully in order to win your gunfights, because once you are exposed, now you've only got a pistol against their primary weapons. And I just feel that would be a far more balanced way to use this, where you could still make some really funny, crazy moments happen with this, but you don't also get the full power of your primary weapons with the perfect attachments on it alongside the field upgrade. So that's one potential way that I feel would actually balance this quite nicely. I'd have far less of an issue with it if that were the case. Or another idea I had is make this a score streak instead of a field upgrade. I'd have a much easier time accepting this if the player had to earn it by getting a certain amount of score in one life, rather than just existing in the match for a period of time. Now that one does seem a little bit unlikely, but just something I thought of as well. And then finally, if they don't do anything, I really would like to see a reduction to the active duration of Sleeper Agent. In my opinion, 30 seconds plus 3 seconds per kill is just way too long, and I'd much rather see that cut down to like 15 to maybe 20 seconds at most, with those 3 additional seconds per kill, or just make it a flat 30 seconds with no ability to increase that with extra kills. I think either of those options would be a lot more reasonable than what we're currently seeing with the Sleeper Agent. And there we go. That's pretty much it. That is going to wrap it up for all of my thoughts on the current state of Sleeper Agent in the Black Ops 6 beta. But of course, I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you guys feeling about Sleeper Agent based on your experience with it so far? Do you guys agree with me? Do you generally not like Sleeper Agent in the game in its current state? Or do you disagree entirely? Do you think the Sleeper Agent was an excellent addition to the game, and are you happy that it's here and do you not want it to change? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.